Have you ever met someone who seems incredibly kind at first? Someone who smiles often, speaks gently, listens carefully, and somehow makes you feel safe almost immediately, yet, over time, something about them starts to feel off? Not obviously wrong, not something you can clearly point out, just a quiet discomfort that slowly grows, like your instincts are trying to tell you something your mind hasn't fully understood yet. Because the truth is, not all kindness is real. Some people don't show kindness because they feel it. They perform it, carefully, intentionally, because it serves a purpose. And the most dangerous part is, they rarely look like the problem. They look like the nicest person in the room. People who pretend to be nice often understand one simple thing very well, that people trust kindness, that we are naturally drawn to those who make us feel seen, heard, and valued, and that once trust is established, it becomes much easier to influence, control, or even manipulate without being questioned. This doesn't always come from a place of pure malice. Sometimes it comes from insecurity, from a need to be liked, from a fear of rejection. But regardless of the reason, the behavior itself follows similar psychological patterns. One of the most common patterns is what psychologists refer to as impression management, which is the tendency to control how others perceive you, often by presenting an idealized version of yourself that may not fully reflect who you really are. In this case, kindness becomes a tool, not an emotion. They say the right things at the right time, with the right tone, not necessarily because they feel it deeply, but because they know it creates a certain reaction in you. And over time, you start associating them with comfort, even if that comfort isn't entirely genuine. Another key behavior is inconsistency, and this is where things begin to reveal themselves. At first, they are attentive, supportive, almost overly kind, but slowly, small cracks begin to appear. They might become distant without explanation, subtly dismiss your feelings, or behave differently when there's nothing to gain. But when you notice this and start to pull away, they return to being nice again. And this cycle creates confusion, because now you're not sure which version of them is real. This pattern is closely linked to something known as intermittent reinforcement, a concept in behavioral psychology where unpredictable rewards create stronger emotional attachment than consistent ones. It's the same mechanism that makes people addicted to uncertainty, because you keep hoping that the good version of them will come back again. There's also a deeper layer to this behavior, and that is the use of kindness as a form of control. Real kindness expects nothing in return. But performative kindness often comes with invisible expectations. They help you, support you, listen to you, and at some point, consciously or unconsciously, they expect something back. Loyalty, attention, agreement, or emotional dependence. And when that expectation is not met, their behavior changes. Not dramatically, not in a way that makes them look bad, but subtly enough for you to feel it. Maybe they become colder, quieter, or slightly passive-aggressive, and without realizing it, you start adjusting your behavior to keep their kindness. You become more careful with your words, more agreeable, more accommodating, not because you want to, but because you don't want to lose that version of them. Another important aspect is how they handle conflict, or more accurately, how they avoid it. People who pretend to be nice often struggle with direct communication, not because they don't have opinions, but because expressing them honestly might risk their image. So instead of addressing issues directly, they suppress them. And those suppressed emotions don't disappear, they leak out in indirect ways. Through sarcasm, subtle criticism, emotional withdrawal, or talking behind your back. This creates a disconnect between what they show and what they actually feel. And that disconnect is what makes the relationship feel unstable, even if everything looks fine on the surface. It's also important to understand that not everyone who behaves this way is intentionally trying to hurt you. Sometimes this pattern develops as a defense mechanism. People who grew up in environments where love was conditional often learn to adapt by becoming what others expect. They learn that being nice is the safest way to be accepted. So they hide parts of themselves, avoid conflict, and prioritize being liked over being real. But even when it's unintentional, the impact remains the same. Because relationships built on performance cannot create real trust. Over time, being around someone like this can be emotionally draining. You might feel confused because their words and actions don't always align. You might feel guilty because you can't clearly explain what's wrong. And you might even start questioning yourself, wondering if you're overthinking, if you're too sensitive, or if the problem is actually you. But that confusion is often the signal. Because real kindness doesn't make you feel uncertain. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't require you to constantly analyze someone's intentions. So how do you recognize the difference? Real kindness is consistent. It doesn't disappear when there's nothing to gain. It doesn't change based on convenience. It's quiet, stable, and doesn't demand anything in return. Fake kindness, on the other hand, often feels performative. It appears strong at the beginning, fades when tested, and returns when needed. It creates a cycle of comfort and confusion. And, most importantly, it makes you feel like you have to earn it. Understanding this doesn't mean you become cold or distrustful. It simply means you become aware. Aware of patterns, not just words. Aware of consistency, not just moments. Because anyone can be kind occasionally, but not everyone can be real consistently. In the end, the goal isn't to judge people harshly or to assume the worst in others. It's to protect your energy, your emotional clarity, and your sense of self. Because the more you understand human behavior, the less likely you are to be controlled by it. And the more you value authenticity, the less you will settle for anything that feels slightly off. Because real connection doesn't come from perfection, it comes from honesty. And honesty doesn't always look nice, but it always feels real.